Підманули Галю, забрали з собою.
Good evening, everybody. Just let everyone settle in for a minute. Fire up the can. All right, anyway, can you guys hear me fine? I'm hearing back. I'm hearing the audio back. That's not good. I don't want that. All right, anyway, you guys hear me fine? I'm hearing a loop back. I gotta kill this audio. I can't have my own audio back on my own ears. How are you?
I'm
Oh, you
good.
got your vyshyvankas.
I'm good.
Dobre.
Доброй ночи.
Завжди class. We have both have our nice vyshyvanka on. I actually was wearing my T-shirt until about 30 minutes ago. I went to go get some coffee and you know what? Vyshyvanka time.
It's vyshyvanka time. It has to
So,
be. How's you?
it's cold and we got some snow starting up for the night, but I actually kind of am happy with that because that means in the morning when I go to the energy briefing, I will be going in some traction because now we've had 2 days of patting the last snow down to a nice ice slick.
Gotcha.
And I'm only so brave until that little part of me kicks in and go, oh, you want to fall on your ass today? How brave are you? I'm staying home in my little shelter. So how are things besides the news? Don't watch the news for a moment. I'm being triggered. But how are you?
God, all I do is news. But yeah, I'm good. I'm getting through. It's we've had the moment of it's big internship push at the moment for our undergrad journalism population. It's kind of funny going through these job fairs and being like, my options are summer camp counselor or Boston Beer Company graphic design, and I'm like, I was working in a bomb shelter 2 months ago. I don't. But yeah, it's getting warmer in Boston, and by that I mean it's like the 12 degrees Celsius rather than negative 10 degrees Celsius.
Oh my God. Actually, there was a day where I thought it was the coldest I could see here. And one of our friends in Minneapolis had said, how's he going over there? He told me the temperature. I don't remember what it was, but it was like another 10 degrees the opposite direction. Okay, I'm going to stop complaining about our ridiculously cold weather because that's worse. Plus, we don't have ice problems, if you know what I mean.
Yes. I mean, you said Minneapolis. They've certainly got a lot of icy weather there. But
so I want to thank our friends for joining us, and I want to tell you why we're doing this. One, we just like to talk in Substack. It's a great place to talk. But I have been a journalist accidentally forever. I grew up loving news, and in KPFT land, I went from being editor guy, guest first, then host, and then editor with the audio. I had the studio at my house. That we didn't have a studio for news at the station at the time, so everything was done at my studio. And eventually, I just got really, really into it, and it's a passion. And I think that we're in an area of attacks on the press that are kind of unprecedented. And I lived through Bush and Cheney era of news where I thought that was going to be as bad as it got. And here we are. And so I have been reaching out to people who do journalism, especially independent, or trying to get into that side that's not the mainstream corporate media, and say we have a major enemy at hand that's trying to kill us as press. So let me hand the mic to you and ask your perspective as someone who's doing this in America, plus someone who's come here. What do you think about our current climate, and what is the mission from your angle?
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. I know I'm seeing in the chat, we've got a few people that know me, but for those who don't,
I see one named Tom.
Yes, my dad is here. I was gonna keep it under wraps, so hi, Dad, and also Liam and Patrick and Hannah. I'm Chloe. I am a independent freelance journalist. Hi, Dan. And I went to Ukraine independently. I was working in Ireland for Hot Press magazine as an intern. And a big props to my editors there, because it's not so often you have your 20-year-old intern come into your office and say, not ask, but say, I'm going to a war zone, which came
I like
well.
that. You didn't ask for permission. You made it directive. That's good.
Yeah, and I think you'll get a kick out of this. I forgot to tell you the other day. I ran into the person who actually, I think, was the first domino for me coming to Ukraine, which was I was reporting. My main gig has been protests. For ages, I reported about protests in the U.S. I reported about back 2016, 2020 Black Lives Matter protests is kind of where the big mass movements where I got my start.
Awesome.
And the first time that I was got in some sticky situations where there was violence at protests, and then continued to do that here in Boston, where I am now. I'm speaking for the Boston Public Library. And then I came to Dublin to work at Hot Press, did protest reporting there. And I remember when I was in Boston, probably 3 years ago or so, I was reporting, it was the, I think it must have been second year anniversary of the full-scale invasion. And there was loads of people there, and I was writing, of course, for a student-run paper, and I heard that, someone said, that guy, he's a professor, he's a university professor. And I was like, well, I'm a university student, I should interview the professor. And I went up to him and I said, he's a great man. He is a professor at UMass Boston. I said, hey, introduce myself, would you have time? And he goes, wait a minute. He interrupts me and goes, wait a minute. Before you interview me, I'll give you a quote, but before you interview me, I want you to go and talk to a Ukrainian. Go find a Ukrainian, talk to them. And if you still want a quote from me, sure, but go talk to a Ukrainian first. And that's your directive. And I went and I spoke to loads of Ukrainians, and I got that perspective, and I realized that kind of became my directive for journalism in general, was just to speak to the people who are actually being affected, because I know I can speak to plenty of British analysts and American politicians and Irish thinkers, but they're not the ones who are having Shahed missiles on their houses every night. So I went as a freelancer to Ukraine, and I learned very quickly how hard it is to be a freelancer and how hard it is to try and be independent. And the fact that I spoke with some role models of mine in journalism who work for I won't say who, but who work for the big name news, who said, oh yeah, just buy your own PPE. So it was bulletproof vest and ballistic helmet. They said, oh, just buy your own. And I looked up.
And what do you use that for? Because when I go to the front, I don't.
Yeah,
I'm just joking. I mean, it's true, but I'm also making a slight aside here about the PPE.
Yeah, I ended up getting some of the best advice I got was actually from a lad who is a humanitarian organizer, an English lad, and he said, well, the places where you'll need it, you'll be with like a military unit or an organization that will lend it to you, which was I think. Yeah. But after I came back, that kind of ties into something I was going to mention. I saw there was an NPR journalist who went on Instagram and said, here's what I'm packing for my reporting assignment. And I'm looking and I'm like, oh, that's the same brand that when I signed up for Reporters Without Borders to get my insurance and all that, it was the same brand that they were suggesting lending out. They were like, oh, come to Paris, we'll give you. And it's the same plates, the same helmet. And I'm like, oh, I wonder if she's going to Ukraine. And then she goes, yeah, and I'm excited to be reporting in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I've been to Minneapolis, and I was shocked. And to hear that is my own country, that we now, and then to look into the background. And my course is journalism, international affairs. So I study just the concepts of democracy. And so the indicators of democracy, the idea of a free press, are something that's just drilled into me over and over again. And all of these main indicators come back and tell us that the United States is no longer a democracy. And that's not, a lot of people would say, oh, well, here goes the leftists like coming in claiming, making these crazy claims. No, that is the Institute for the Study of War. That is all of these very well trusted, V Institute, all of these VDEM Institute, all of these like industry standard, world standard tools have recognized that the United States is no longer a democracy, that it is an
Right.
electoral.
And like I've been pointing out, the corruption model index is updated every year, and it went to even further decline, which is not a surprise when we know about Donald Trump. But that's very important, especially like when I first got here 4 years ago. The reverence and kindness towards America, the belief in who we were supposed to be, was a big deal. So let's build it on that we're supposed to be the hallmark of freedom.
Yes. And I spoke to a lot of people, and what I realized, something I learned about journalism in Ukraine, was that the people drive the stories. And of course, everyone tells you that, but when you really experience it like that, and what that reminded me of was that when I was in Kharkiv, my goal was to speak to Kharkiv-based humanitarian organizations, aid groups that were like led by people from Kharkiv that are like based in Kharkiv. So I
Yeah.
spoke to Station Kharkiv, Peaceful Heaven, these organizations, great people running those, like really impressive work they're doing. But something that I noticed that they didn't speak about, but I was in Station Kharkiv, or Peaceful Heaven's headquarters first, and I saw on the wall they had a photo of their leadership shaking hands with people from USAID. And then
Right.
later, when I was at Station Kharkiv, they had USAID stickers on the tables. And I ended up talking to them, and they were describing this, like, how the US was this beacon of hope, like you described, how it's like, oh, they're always willing to send aid to help, and that a lot of organizations who then donate, like other third-party organizations who send them money, get that money from USAID. So when USAID shut down, it was a massive blow to these essential frontline organizations, because it's not necessarily, yes, USAID does a lot of great work themselves, but it's a lot of these organizations that are doing the on the ground, insulating houses, bringing generators, redoing the trucks in Dnipro, that sort of thing is done by these organizations led by Ukrainians based in Ukraine. But when that funding is cut off because we have a president who doesn't think that it's worth it, that is directly leading to thousands of deaths, and these people are completely losing hope in what the United States is and what it stands for.
One thing that's painful is how many times even now I get corrected about how much support actually exists in Ukraine, which I know intellectually once I push that button inside that says, "Don't forget the 73% who support." But Ukrainians still do that. If I go out right now and say, "Yeah, this is lit, через американцев, чому," and I basically kind of rant in Ukrainian on a regular basis. I'm quite transformed after 4 years. I'm bitching in Ukrainian all the time. And they're like, "No, no, no, це дуже багато людей, and they're very clear that they know Americans as people still support. They're just confused with what happens with Trump and how we got there and some other aspects that, like, where does it go? But that still bothers me. It still is painful in a way. I mean, I respect it, but it's painful as an American from Texas that says, it's a mirage. And I told this story with Dennis last night about how a woman who wanted to go on a date and like basically, will you take me to America? Like, why do you want to go to America? You want to live in? Don't you want to return to America? No, no, you have Delma. And I'm like, I'm here. Wait. So I had to juxtapose. I said, okay, so look, I know we have drones and rockets, but here's video of me on television covering mass shooting in Poway. Here's Gilroy. Here's Christchurch. And I went through all the things I covered as a counterterrorism guy. I go, did you have a kid go in and shoot up a Silpo today? No, no, no. Your reaction alone tells me what you're not seeing that we live through in America. So before we get back to Ukraine, I want to stick with something that you said that you did that we both did, actually. I went to the Broward County Election Center when the Proud Boys showed up in November. It was like the 10th through the following week, and then also in Orlando when they were showing up at Trump rallies. And I covered protests for a long time, and a lot of what I see now was completely predictable then. So I want to stay on that just for a moment before we come back to Ukraine, and we have plenty we'll say about Ukraine. But you see it as an American journalist, the requirement of us trying to tell the truth about what is now normalized in the government with these guys. And you cover Black Lives Matter, so you know that was where the Boogaloo Boys showed up and said, "Hey, we can work together to overthrow the government," right? Let's talk about that a little bit. Your experience in those protests.
Yeah, I think there was the Black Lives Matter. That was all independent journalism. I mean, I was in high school.
Mhm.
What has really the protests that have stuck with me lately have been I was at the very first No Kings protest.
Okay.
What would become No Kings,
Right.
the 50-51, which I've been tracking it. 50-51 became No Kings, and I remember it starts out with like 10 people standing outside like the state house or the city center and like
Mhm.
holding a sign, and it turns into I'd say a quarter of Boston, the streets were full. And
Mm.
and you have the mayor and the senators on stage. You have the Dropkick Murphys playing. Like, it was different.
Love the Dropkick Murphys. Even before this era, I loved Dropkick Murphys, but yeah, they're even better now.
After reaching out to their agents 20 times, it was a girl who was shadowing me, a first year girl who was shadowing me, who's like, "Do you know who Ken Carson is? I just interviewed him." And I'm like,
Mhm.
but anyways, I think that what has been interesting to me about protests is, and especially contrasting with the protests I saw in Ireland, because I know I've got a couple Irish viewers on here tuning in.
Yeah.
What shocked me was that the Irish are willing to. American protests tend to be about message and trying to get visibility for message. Because I know I've actually met Erica Chenoweth, who's shipping up to Boston, yes. Erica Chenoweth was the researcher who came up with the 3.5% rule, which pretty much says if 3.5% of the population engages in social protest and demonstrations, then regime change or government change is possible.
Right.
And I met her and I spoke to her about it. And I think the difference is American protest, and it was a historical kind of literature review. In American protests, it tends to be how many people can we get out holding signs? Let's be peaceful. Let's do Zumba in front of the detention centers.
Yeah.
Versus in Dublin, where I mean, I think someone in here was in the office when I came back after being pepper sprayed in the face while reporting on the protests blocking the Dublin port, which successfully turned over
Wow.
several trucks as a protest against Israeli apartheid goods. So that there's direct action and there's demonstration, and I think they're two very different things. But something that Erica Chenoweth told me that scares me to my core, that I genuinely think we should all be scared of this, and I don't have a solution. But she said the 3.5% rule is no longer really it's likely no longer relevant because of AI and because of the surveillance state in the United States.
Mm.
I don't know if anyone's seen, not to put a Russian on a pedestal, but Pussy Riot's Nadia's surveillance state art project.
Yeah.
She did an interview that really stuck with me. I think it was Chicago Tribune when she was doing her art in Chicago. And they said she's talking about her surveillance state thing, about what it is, the authoritarianism in Russia. And she says, they finish up the interview, and the interviewer says, well, thank you for being here. We're really excited to see surveillance state in person. And she buries her face in her hands. She goes, no, you already have surveillance state in person. You already have it. And that was, I think, 2024 or early 2025. It's unbelievable now. I'm currently doing an investigation about flock security cameras. If anyone here is into national security and surveillance, check out I forgot exactly, but go on YouTube, find the one with the cool graphics. It's a short documentary about flock security cameras.
Mm-hmm.
And looking into the extent of that and the decryption and the extent to which our government is quite incompetent when it comes to our own security and intentionally encroaching on what should be our security is absolutely terrifying.
And that's before it got corrupted in this current era. So you have incompetence, and then you have corruption, which are two different problems. So similarly, when you have certain people who are running the intelligence agency, the Department of Justice, the FBI, it changes everything. I tell people be very careful about filing an OC3 filing now, because it's not the same FBI that we learned to trust over years. And this comes from someone who, my political circles were very leery of the FBI for a long time, obviously. And now you see what happens when it's weaponized, and you see the DOJ weaponized, and you see that they can't tell the truth about any investigations. But then they're that plus incompetent, which means we have kind of in many ways an unparalleled paradigm to deal with. And Nadia is very wise about that, to say, you guys are naive then if you think that it's coming but not there.
Yeah. It's been here. It's been here for a very, very long time. And what kind of makes me have that, like, burying my face in my hands reaction is the people who are saying, like, oh, what is going to happen when AI becomes so advanced that we can no longer, and this ties to journalism, that we can no longer distinguish a true fact or a true image from an AI generated one.
Right.
It's already happened. Look at the amount of people when Alex Preddy was shot. Look at the amount of people who saw a picture of him on, I've been seeing it. I've been cursed with, I don't know why. I look at threads. It's like Twitter, but worse. But
is it worse, really?
It's just like, it's like Twitter, but instead of it being very right wing, it's just the side of Twitter that's very how do I put this in journalistic terms? Uninformed.
Noise. I think of it as noise, and I've been just talking about journalism in the terms of nutrition. So, like empty food that has no nutrients.
Yeah, and yeah, it's been severe. And I just saw a question that I'd love to respond to.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
California signed an agreement with Ukraine. What does it involve? So it is true. I don't know if I can give you the specifics of what that agreement involves, but I can tell you it's economic. So California, I'm from California, Bay Area, and California is special. I think we see, and I think this ties into, I've been talking a lot because lately I've been reporting about Iran here, and speaking to a lot of Iranians. And we talk about the rise of Reza Pahlavi as an opposition leader. And I've started to see it almost, I mean, Gavin Newsom is not the son of the Shah, but Gavin Newsom, I believe, is starting, I joked about it before, I think he's genuinely starting to be the rising opposition leader to Trump, or at least he's positioning himself as so.
Right.
And he actually, as much as we want to be, oh, he's got the tweets, oh, he's got the funny attitude, he's trying to do like the merch. He sold like he was trying to make fun of Trump by selling a Gavin Newsom branded Bible and saying it's
right.
But he actually has the backing, because the reason, so it isn't necessarily with the whole country of Ukraine, it's with the Lviv region, probably with the Lviv Oblast. And the Lviv Oblast, of course, has its own economic strength. The California as a state is a massive economy. I think that's not exactly what it is. I think it's a bigger economy than Japan or something. Don't quote me on that, but it is a massive economy. So it's like, I have to look into more. I can't give you the specifics on what the argument entails or what the agreement entails. But my perspective is that it isn't just for show. It isn't just lip service. Like, this is a significant backing, and I wonder if this is going to spark something of looking beyond just Trump, as Trump being the American leadership embodied, and to start looking into the American leaders and figures that are actually going to make change. They're actually, you can say you stand with Ukraine, but you can't follow it up with and Russia, and you can't not have any actual actions. I did see that.
You mean like the
yes,
the thing that triggered me a while ago, just as we were getting to the air, this, the sadness for the Russians. Oh, and the Ukrainians. Wow. Yeah, Nemo should say. But I want to stick to this thing about California, because when I was in Mykolaiv last year, first off, a protest broke out here in Kyiv while I was away over SBU. We'll come back to that. But I was talking to the mayor, Alexander, and I said, you just presented us a whole bunch of sister cities for both Mykolaiv, and it's something that's happened here in Ukraine and across the country. And I'm from Houston, and a natural alliance of this partnership would be between Houston and Mykolaiv, as an example. So what you're talking about often is framed as sister city concepts, where there's economic partnerships, cultural exchanges, and boosts that really do matter, even if it's at state level.
Yeah. I think the sister city thing is interesting. And I might not be remembering this exactly correct, but there's a conference that happens every year at Harvard that I go to, the Tamersi Contemporary Ukraine Conference. And I think it was last year, the theme was reconstruction. And we had the mayor of Bucha come and speak. And the mayor of Bucha, he's a funny guy. He's this
Andrei,
huge
yeah.
soldier.
Anatoly, yeah, I know him.
Yeah, he's this huge guy, big beard, tattoos, like he could crush you like a can of Coke. And he had this high pitched voice, and I remember I'd tell the story and I laugh a little bit, but he was like, I was speaking at a conference at Harvard, which is like I go there and I wear my blazer and I feel all official, and he's going, I don't understand how I have to come to these fucking conferences to talk to these fucking people. And it was kind of so. Then he starts talking, and he talks about how these representatives have to come and like have these cultural exchanges and exchange with the kind of economic side and the actual action side, and how it's like, oh, we're gonna have Kherson is in the news, so Kherson gets money. Kharkiv is in the news. Kharkiv gets donations. But the thing that I didn't understand about Ukraine until I started going to those conferences, and then really started to understand once I came to the country, was that I am so used to living in places with a centralized government, with a highly centralized government. And Ukraine is more regional. Like the regional governments have far more strength than I would say, like the Irish counties do. Like you're not necessarily going to have, Liam is probably going to laugh at me for saying this, but you're not necessarily going to have like the same or like vastly different experiences living in, I don't know. I was about this, Wexford and Dublin, like maybe.
Okay.
That might not be the best. Wexford and Meath, I don't know. Might not be the best analogy, but versus Ukraine, Lviv is going to have a very different experience than Kupiansk. It's
right.
They're different economies, they're different leadership. It's an entirely different thing. And he talks, like the mayor was talking to Anatoly about how he feels like it's almost a extra burden that he has to come, and he has to like, it's almost like how so many journalists I've talked to lately are like, what do you mean I have to start posting on TikTok to get people to read the news? Like, he's already going.
I feel this somewhere inside me. I'm bothered by this, but I know it to be true.
Yes.
It's screaming at the top of my lungs, like, here's the people that need your help. 5 views, 24 hours later.
Yeah.
All that work. Yeah.
And something that happened at the conference this year, and the theme was, I think, solidarity and different ways of acting in solidarity. And it's, I think there were 3 things. I think it was standing in solidarity, speaking in solidarity, and acting in solidarity, and how those are 3 separate things, and you need to recognize that. But someone brought up, there was an American who's done some work with, I think, evacuation methods in the East. And I feel terrible, I don't remember her name. I'll figure it out eventually. But she said that they did a bit of a slight experiment where they were trying to work with injured civilians, mostly adults, who were injured from the eastern regions in hospitals, and to raise money for their medical care. And she said she got some, it was her kind of, she's originating in kind of other conflicts, so she's not like, she's a little unsure, is this normal amount of donations? And then she posted something where it was, help find homes for the kittens and the puppies that were left behind, and they're alive, they're just stray now. And which is a like very valorous endeavor, but got 5 times the amount of donations because she put a picture of a puppy on the first slide. So then she starts putting in, and it's like, you have to have this perfect victimhood. You have to have this idea of the perfect victim. If you put a puppy on the cover, you're going to get 5 times the donations, which is horrific, but it's true. And that's something that I think when we talk about these like cultural exchanges layered on top of the economic help, economic solidarity, these people are going through war, they're being bombed, and yet we have to put a picture of a puppy in front of them. And I think this is something we deal with as journalists as well. We always just give them all the numbers and be like, here's how many have died. This is just recently, I think probably within 10 minutes after this call ending, I'm going to be posting my story about the Iranian community in Boston. Excuse me.
Okay.
And they were I have this urge in me as a journalist to give them the estimate is over 35,000 people died in the span of 2 days. And that is the largest massacre in modern Iranian history. It was the largest uprising since the 1979 revolution. These people, they're shooting people. They're going to the hospitals, finding the protesters that were injured during the protests and shooting them dead, execution style. It's ridiculous, but unfortunately, I have to start with, look at this picture of a little kid holding a flag. And I
Right.
was talking to my photo editor, an amazing photographer, Margot Murphy, I'll plug her, who was telling me, like, so many people, they only look at the photo nowadays. And
Right.
it tears me apart as a long form writer who just wants to
That's
write
right.
long features. I'm sure.
Well, it's
Well,
what's called
absolutely.
often crisis fatigue.
Yes.
And it's something I have to pay attention to. You know, I spent years covering as a researcher ISIS, and the crisis that happened in Syria was related. So until a child was found face down, you know, those things, it becomes an area where fatigue kicks in. And similarly, when there was a review, there was a panel that was held for foreign journalists with filmmakers here for a film series called Culture versus War. Antitila was the feature in that. It was like 45 minutes, I think. And one guy that was in that panel taught me a lesson that has less to do with journalism, but it affects journalism, where he said, I will only give my review of the film when it's just you and I, meaning him and the filmmakers and the producer. But Chris has to join me. Okay. So I was brought in and I sat down and, you know, 12 of us gave our review in front of everyone. And then we went in with this guy and the filmmakers. And he goes, okay, why do I even like these guys? No, you can't answer actually. And that was the rules. They're not allowed to answer back anything but clarification questions. So not allowed to banter with him. He goes, you didn't introduce me to them. I don't are they even a cool band? Do people like them? I don't know. You threw them directly to the front. Okay. See, Chris already likes you. And I learned a lot in that one session where everything I film as well, if I'm already on board, what is the presentation I'm delivering to people who are uninitiated, right? I haven't given you a reason to like somebody except for this Ukrainian man went through hell. This Ukrainian woman went through hell. And so I began to rethink of how I have to present the stories where human beings in Texas and Ohio and Minneapolis, wherever, have to see a human being. They have to relate to that human being, and then the story can transmit. If I say a Ukrainian person went through, they're like Ukraine, Ukraine. Even if they're sympathetic, there's an overdose, and that's crisis fatigue right there.
Yeah, that really is kind of my process. I wrote the first piece that was published, and currently the only piece published in Hot Press. We're working on that, but
Okay.
the first piece published in Hot Press from Ukraine, it was my interview with Veronica Velch, who's the director of Amnesty International Ukraine.
Right, right. Mm-hmm.
Amazing woman, and I wrote this whole piece about her, and my first draft, I opened with her experience and how she told me that it was right after I think 11-hour long bombing campaign, and
Right.
it was I had been in Lviv, and I was on the train when I arrived in Kyiv. The bombing was actively happening.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time in the metro. I felt the ground shake. It was scary. But I opened with her telling me that she had gotten a call that her children's school, which was an international Christian school in Kyiv, that a shahed had fallen right in the playground, right on the playground.
Right.
And that she had this quote that had stuck with me so firmly that she said, instead of going to the cinema with my kids, I'm going to their school, or like instead of going to their school to help them like look at their art projects or speak to their teachers, I'm going to their school to record war crimes. And she said, "Oh, but don't worry, we're blessed that it happened on a Saturday." And I was like, it took me a minute, but then I wrote this whole piece based around those quotes. And then I ran it by my editor, and I ran it by some of my journalism friends, and what I got back was, well, we keep hearing that story. Everyone's heard that story about someone who, oh, I should be taking my kids to school, but instead I'm hiding with them in the subway. Everyone's heard that story. And at first I'm like, well, shut up. I don't care that everyone's heard it. They're going to hear it again. But it's like, have to make kind of the exchanges as a journalist of realizing that the general public, you need to reach them. You need to meet them where they are at a point. You can't force. It's like how if I was the if I was the dictator of the world, everyone would have to. There'd be no more internet. Everyone has to read the newspaper. Get the physical newspaper and read it. That's my perfect world. That's not the world now. So I need to make things accessible for digital services. And then I need to make them, they're like, you need to make it interesting the first 100 words. No one's going to read past the first 100 words. Very few people are going to read the whole thing. And I know full well that some people have told me, oh, great piece. And I know full well you guys read the first 2 paragraphs. But the first paragraph, I needed to hook someone in, like you said, with someone they can relate to, which was me.
Right.
And I don't like putting myself in stories. I'm very much, the story is not about me. I'm not Ukrainian. I don't have any.
I completely understand this dilemma. I've stayed off camera for 4 years until a month ago when my Ukrainian friends were like, no, we need more of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I opened with myself talking about, like, I called you the other day and I could hear you because of the generators. And that was so different for me. It was like I had a headache the whole time I was in Kyiv because these generators are running on full blast everywhere because that's the only way they can keep the lights on. And the way that when I first left my hostel, it was a bunch of Georgian guys in the hostel, and one of them told me, oh, you should, if you can, wait another 20 minutes because the power is going off at noon. So charge your devices now because you won't be able to charge them for God knows how long.
Right.
And someone saying like, oh, wherever you're going, just make sure you know where the nearest metro station is, that sort of thing, of like stuff that I'm so unfamiliar with, and that most of my readers, whether you're in Dublin or San Francisco or Boston, or London, you're not going to know what that's like. You're not going to know the experience because I didn't know what it was like until I was there. And so to open with that and be like, from that perspective is something that people were able to connect to more. And then I can be like, ooh, I've hooked you in. Now here's the facts. Here's the background. Here's the fact that Putin has rejected every peace negotiation and Zelensky's accepted almost all of them. And here's the fact that Russia has committed a uncountable number more war crimes than Ukraine has, and that there are, like, we can't even get into the prisons to confirm the sheer quantity of human rights violations that we're hearing about Russian prisons. And I have to sneak that in, which is like, it's like putting a pill in a spoonful of peanut butter to give to your dog. Not to compare audiences to dogs. I love my audiences, but
you're friendlier than I am. I've been telling our readers, are you zombie food or are you useful? What? Just saying, if I'm looking out, like you said, dictator of the world, godlike figure, if I have to save people, I've got the van packed with the tech bros. First van is the tech bros. Everyone who keeps fucking up my programs, they're in the first van. I'm going to save a lot of people by throwing them. Did you fuck with my Lightroom program? Yeah. In the van. So things like that. But it is a problem when you do journalism to figure out that part that gets past that numbness. Like I said, the Ukraine fatigue or crisis fatigue, and it becomes irritating as someone who lives in it. Yeah. Like, why am I having to make this all pretty and bow-like for you? Do I have to put a kiss on top of it? Yeah. And then there's a contempt that comes in because you're still human. You as a journalist are still human. That's the news for tonight.
And that's a good note for it. Yeah. I think a lot of people forget that. A lot of people forget. I think another thing, if I was God, then I would be making people take classes about it because something that I hear, this is my Gen Z perspective, we have to stop saying they don't teach this in schools, or like, we need a media literacy class. There was one. It's called English. You didn't pay attention. And aside from that, I think but something that we didn't include in our English classes that we should is how to read a journalistic article, how to read a news article.
Right.
Because we learn a lot about, God, I could pick apart Fahrenheit 451 front to back twice over in the next 2 hours. But so many people don't know, like, they don't know how to read a headline. They don't know how, like, they don't understand that the headline needs to be short because it needs to fit in a certain number of words, and that when something is in quotation marks, that's because it's a quote. And I'm trying not to sound too patronizing, but I think there are some things that I have seen in my own. Patrick, if you're still on here, you know that Patrick was the one who sent me, oh, your article has been published on Instagram. And then thank you, Patrick, for not telling me to look in the comments. That was the mistake that I made, was to look and to see that.
This is like people who make films and write books who say, never read the critics.
Oh God, never read your Instagram comments. Never, ever, ever. Because there's been ones where it's funny. Like there was one, there was the headline, I think, was 1,000 sign petition to move, in quotes, far right protest out of County Mayo, I think. Because it's quotes, because I can't, as a journalist, I can't directly say that it's far right, even though if it talks like a doc, if it talks like a fascist and walks like a fascist, then, but I can't directly say that. So I was taking it from a quote saying someone had described it as far right, all the comments. And there were 2,000, I think 2,100, like over 2,000 signatures on this petition. All the comments were one of a few things. There was, how dare you call it thousands? It's 2,100. Or it's, oh, how dare you put far right in quotes? You don't think it's far right? Like, apparently they think I'm being sarcastic. Or just because it's far right, just because it's not far left doesn't mean it's far right. It's all those comments. But I remember walking into the office after that was posted. And for a good while, that was the magazine's most interacted with post. And I had my coworkers be like, I don't know if you want to see this. And then I looked and I was like, I'm still deciding which one of those I want to get tattooed. I'm thinking like woke bitch as knuckle tattoos.
Yeah.
A good like leftist.
I'm going to make a note of that for me too. I've been working on my first tattoo. That would be a great one.
There are a lot of funny ones, but again, my dad is in this chat, so I'm not going to list off all of them. But those were the funny ones. But when it comes to something, and that was something that like it went ahead. No one was physically harmed. Although, if you ask me as a person, not as a journalist, I don't think it should have happened. And what was said was incredibly damaging to people's psyche. Back to my journalistic voice, when I wrote about Ukraine and I posted that, and it's people don't realize they see this quote. And first of all, we did open with a story about war and the military. And our first quote was Veronica had told me, we were talking about the idea of neutrality and how I had heard from some Irish audiences that they were hesitant to donate to Ukraine because a lot of the money goes to the military, and the Irish are very serious about defending their neutrality. And the first quote that we put on was Veronica had said, oh, well, before the war, we were neutral. And look how that turned out for us. We were neutral. We gave up our nuclear weapons. We're peaceful. And then this happened. Can no longer be neutral. Like if your neighbor bursts into your house waving an axe, saying he's going to break down your house and kill you and your whole family, you can't be neutral in that situation, which to us Americans is like, duh. But when you are bringing, I didn't really fully consider that when you are bringing that kind of perspective that is immediately kind of, it is linguistically saying something that is against neutrality, and you're putting that out to an Irish audience, you are not like that. And especially given that Zelensky has gone out and said positive things about Israel, because if you say negative things about Israel, you are going to lose U.S. support. So of course he said positive things about Israel, but all of these comments are just saying that it's terrible journalism, it's horrible, like how dare you say this, how dare you endorse this. But I had like a few comments in there that were stuff like, well, you can say all this stuff about neutrality, but the commenters, but at its core, it's about people. And it's about the people who have gone through war and the people who have bombs on their houses, on their children's schools. I went to a music school, and I had this is, I think, a story I told you, but a story that really sticks with me that I keep telling over and over again because I think it's
and that's what we're here for. By all means, share it. That's what we're here for.
The most important, I think, interaction that I had was with a 4-year-old. I was in a music school, and if you want more of the story about this, it's on my LinkedIn. It was I talked about it in my interview with News Talk on the Pat Kenny show. This little girl, it was this music class. It was a violin class, and it was ages probably 4 to 14, most on the younger side. And about 2 months prior, a missile had fallen directly on the roof of the school, or like 4 months prior. And they managed to get it patched up quite quickly and get get instruments, some violins donated from Germany. But these children, it's the Suzuki method is special. I learned violin with the Suzuki method. It brings in the parents. So the parents have to kind of be there for part of the lesson and be making sure the kids are practicing. So for both the children and the parents, this is one of the only times where they are not thinking about war. They're only thinking about the violin. They're not thinking about the invasion and the bombs and how, we have to charge our devices because the power is going to go out. And, we have to make sure that our basement is safe or that we have space in the hallway to sleep tonight because there's going to be missile attacks and that sort of thing. They're only focusing on the violin. And this little girl at the end, all the kids are practicing their English on me. It's adorable. But this little girl, she reaches up, she's grabbing on my pant leg. And she goes, did you like the music? And I was like, yes, I did. And she goes, did you hear the noises last night? And it was the day after the big bombing campaign, the day after I'd arrived. And I went, yes, I did. And she goes, I have to walk to school now. And I'm like, what do you mean? And she goes, my daddy doesn't have a car anymore. And I was like, oh. And her dad comes to pick her up and he's like, oh, yeah, you're the American journalist, because God bless that teacher. She had gotten approval from all of the parents to let me take B-roll, which was so sweet. I didn't even ask for that. But they all knew that I was there. So he said, oh, you're the American journalist. And I said, yeah. And I said, well, you don't have to talk to me about this if you don't want to, but whatever you're comfortable with. But your daughter said something to me. She said that you don't have a car anymore and she has to walk to work. And I'm assuming why that is. And he goes, oh, we live down the block. Do you want to come see it? And I saw it, and it looked, there's nothing that we can really compare it to as people who haven't been in war zones before. But the only thing I can think is if you've ever seen Pacific Rim or Godzilla or something where the monster picks up a car and throws it on the ground, or War of the Worlds and it's just crushed like nothing you've ever seen before. It was like that. And you could see the wing of this drone sticking out of the car with Russian writing on it. And I have photos of it that I haven't published yet, but it was just this realization that a reality check as a journalist, that you can do so many interviews over Zoom, over FaceTime, over the phone. You can talk to the diaspora in your respective cities across America, but you're not going to understand war until you're there, and you're not going to understand. And I had to come to terms later with the fact that the people who read my stories are not going to understand war. It's as much as we can tell the stories, it's all we can do is try to get the facts across and get the information across in a completely unbiased way. As much as I want to come in and be like, this was horrific, this thing that I witnessed was horrific, and I want to reply to all the hate comments and tell them this story and tell them about the little girl who has to walk to school because her dad's car was hit by a Shahed drone and she's only 4, and about the little boy from Kupiansk who told me, I asked him where he was from, and he told me, oh, my home is gone. I don't have a home anymore. And the woman Yulia, whose little daughter, they went to therapy when they were in Poland. And the therapist said, well, you have to come to terms with the fact that it might be like this forever. And her telling me that her daughter, she doesn't have to explain war to her daughter, that her daughter is forced to understand war. I want to tell them all these stories, but all I could do is come from the journalistic perspective of here's the facts, here's what is witnessed, here's what is confirmed. I'm
Right.
giving all this information, and I cannot tell you what to do with it. I can't tell the audiences to donate to Station Kharkiv. Oh, donate to this, donate to that.
Right.
Just about this. I can only give you all this information and let you do with it what you please. And that is hard for a journalist, especially an independent journalist who does not have a big name to back me up.
Yeah. And I can tell you, I've been here the entire time of the war. It's from invasion day till today, minus 46, meaning that's the amount of time in 2022 I was only in the States to get some stuff and come back here, and I've been here the entire time since. And I've seen these kind of surreal moments like you're talking about, where even a child might give you advice on how to get through the day because you're from outside. Oh, maybe you don't know, but this is something, and you're like, the child just gave me advice on surviving war and they're 5 or they're 6 or 9 or some age, and like you said about those cars, I've seen that many times, especially just last year. In 1 year alone, 15 buildings ripped apart by missile attacks, and the vehicles that are all in the parking lots are in various forms of destruction, from essentially the blast wave lifting them up and destroying them. It wasn't even necessarily that the missile hit the vehicles. It's the entire area is affected by the blast. Um, I will say this, that as a journalist, you're allowed to be human, and if you're with an organization that won't respect that, then they're the wrong organization. There are some journalists I know that have good teams behind them. I get to talk to them as colleagues and say, I won't name which publications, but I'll say, are they good to you? Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. They we have counselors, and I don't really need them, but I'm glad that they're there. Or they have editors that understand, and they give them the support. And one of the reasons why I'm such an advocate for independent journalism is that there is a point where fake objectivity is betrayal of the truth, and we have to speak truth, not canon in this fake neutral objectivity. So when General Kirillov, the lieutenant general in Moscow, was killed, and BBC calls and says, can you come on? Yeah, of course. Is it on camera or is it radio? It's radio. Good. Okay, I'm ready when you're ready. Do you need coffee? This is espresso. I'll see you in a minute. And they asked me whether or not, because of accountability, did they try to bring him in court? I don't know if you've noticed this. There's not an international court from the way we see things here. Like, don't tell me about the ICC when I'm in Ukraine. It's not going to do anything. There's too many countries not participating, including the one I come from, America. So if he wants to play war will come to his doorstep. Yeah, then that's how things are, right? And the guy at the BBC was like, "Well, thank you for joining us." And I reminded the producer when I got off the phone, I said, "You used to call me over ISIS as not a journalist, but as the ISIS expert. So don't be surprised when I tell you this. There should be no difference between Vladimir Putin's head on a platter and al-Baghdadi's head on a platter." And she said, "This is why I'll probably call you again. See you soon. Take care." I said, "No problem."
Yeah.
What's the difference to me as a journalist? What's the difference? Go for it.
I think. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, go ahead. Mike's yours.
Something that I've noticed that I think you hit right on the head there is that there's this balance between like the journalistic objectivity of what is versus what ought to be. There is the idea of what ought to be, of like, oh, they want us to come and say that everyone's calling for Putin to be tried in the international court, and there's there's an international court that is going to take actions. But I was talking to Amnesty, and then there is an unbelievable amount of evidence. They can't even contain the sheer amount of evidence of war crimes. And Putin hasn't been arrested. There is no action. There is no international court of justice. And this is something, and I hesitate to talk about, I've only started to hesitate to talk about this once I've returned back in America, and I won't go into that because that's a whole other conversation. But especially for my Irish friends watching, it is something that I've had to deal with speaking about Israel, especially, and war crimes did in Gaza. And having a lot of my circle who are in advocacy journalism, and I wouldn't say I'm in advocacy journalism, but a lot of my friends are, and they write a lot about the Palestinian cause, who talk about, well, we need to bring Benjamin Netanyahu to the International Court of Justice. And we have to look on a global scale it's if we're saying, oh, well, if Russian athletes aren't allowed to compete in the Olympics, why should Israeli athletes, and we should ban all of the, there's all these little things, but you have to consider what's actually making an impact and what actually has effect. And the hard truth, the journalistic objectivity of what is, not what ought to be, is that there is no action in International Court of Justice.
Correct.
We need to recognize that. We need to move and find ways up beyond that might be unconventional ways. There is an amazing activist in Ireland, Chris Joyce. She's the refusal artist on Instagram. I will always boost her to hell and back. I had a great call with her the other day about the Israel-Palestine conflict and the genocide, and she's talking about building a coalition. I'm not going to remember the name of the UN resolution, but basically to have an armed peacekeeping force to protect them. And that is action. And that's, I'm not endorsing or speaking against that. I'm not expressing an opinion, but that is the tangible action of when we talk about solidarity. We can all say, you can go and you can post Free Palestine, but you can take action there. And it's similar with Ukraine. You can talk about, oh, I have a fuck Putin sticker on my laptop. Boom, solidarity. But you can also take tangible action. There needs to be international action at the highest level to help to end this war. And we can't.
Clarissa Ward of CNN, who I ran into in the month beforehand, Clarissa Ward said this today very well on Instagram. She put out a video. She says, how many times do you say, "Oh, I'm so, you've been through hell, and I'm so with you," and and you when you're drowning, you paddle so well, and why don't you throw a life vest? Why don't you throw a boat, like something that helps instead of the sympathy? The sympathy is numbing, and I hate the word resilience at this point. I'm triggered by the word.
Did you see there's I think maybe Atlantic that had a opinion column by a journalist that was titled, "We need to stop calling Ukrainians resilient." It was
thank you.
Yeah. It's saying the stuff we hesitate to say as journalists, of because you never want to be don't call Ukrainians resilient, don't just post about solidarity. It's multi-layered. It's more complex than and I say this, I have to check myself often.
Sure.
As someone who will kind of be I think I commented, I'm working on an op-ed now about, and I won't go too deep into this, but I'm working on an op-ed about how the Washington Post layoffs are endangering the lives of Lizzie Johnson, of Shavonna Grady, incredible journalists who I've looked up to for a very long time.
Right.
Who are 2-3 weeks ago, Lizzie was in the car. Everyone's seen her post. She's writing in because the car is the only place where there's warmth. She's got a headlamp, writing with pencil because penning freezes. It's
Sure.
what it's like in Kyiv. You're there when it's far colder than I was there in November, December, and it was cold, but it's nothing like it is in January, February. But is so severe. And I'm writing this, and I have to check myself of I jokingly will say oh, can I assume the general public knows that Jeff Bezos owns the Washington Post? Because I have these assumptions we'd like to think that everyone knows what, not everyone even knows what Watergate was. Not everyone. And then I'm jokingly, oh, haha, can I assume that the general public knows who the Washington Post is? Having to check myself and be okay, I have to understand that the general public does have a level of understanding. But like you said earlier, it's you have to write as someone who's initiated into understanding a situation, and you have to present that situation to the uninitiated. And that doesn't mean dumbing it down. That's something wording that I really don't like, is dumbing it down for the general public. What I would prefer to say is that we are presenting it in a more almost consumable way, a way that people can digest it. You need to give them something easy to chew on. You can't give them something dense and complex. As much as I want to write something dense and complex and full of numbers and data, that's not something that someone's going to want to read. And it's not that they don't understand it. It's that you need to hold their attention, and you need to give them, I think if there's any other American journalists in here who have been to university for journalism, we all know, what is it, The Basics of Journalism, that textbook, and they talk about what is journalism for. It's to give the public the information necessary to make informed decisions about their community, about their society, about their government. Something like that. That's vaguely the quote. And that's the role that we have.
I wrote a piece for my Substack a few weeks ago that talks about that the founders put the press in the First Amendment instead of the 15th Amendment, the 19th Amendment, something way down the line as an afterthought, that they knew the power of press 250 years ago. They understood the value of newspapers being oppressed and the message being stifled at a level that's actually quite prescient of the time we're living in right now. And if people don't take the time to go back and realize that Alexander Hamilton stood up for, a writer who was being silenced, and that the founders, although there were slave owners in this mix, so I have certain qualifications I will say about the white slave state that is America. That the press was invaluable, and when we were talking to Brian Karem 2 weeks ago, I mentioned and also with John Fugelsang 2 weeks ago or last week, that the Gutenberg press and the need to have press at the power of the people versus the state, because the church and the monarchy held it for all so long that the people were being silenced at a way that their suffering was being dismissed, and that's what press was useful for. And so really, if press doesn't do that work, then it's just basically words on paper that do nothing.
Mm-hmm. I think I almost want to say that at the time of the America's founding, it was the invention of the printing press. We all learned that. Printing press. Mm-hmm. The printing press is invented, and it changes everything. I think that the invention of I wrote an essay about this probably for an AP class back in the day. I think I wrote an essay arguing that the printing press was one of the most important factors contributing to the success of the American Revolution.
Correct.
It was the ability to proliferate information, and that was independent press. That was not the king's paper. That was it.
Also, what I call the power of the pamphlet, because you could the power of the pamphlet and a common sense, with Thomas Paine being one of them, that if you were found with one of these things, what were the consequences? And that tells you how important it was.
Yeah. And I think that almost now we're seeing so many modern versions of that. And I will, this is if you've ever seen that meme of like, oh, I don't like the peasant being like, I don't like the king. And then the little other peasant being like, oh, you critique a system while participating in it. That kind of game is, I think there's a balance that we're towing right now. I'm working on a podcast, trying to speak to the laid off Washington Post journalists.
Mm-hmm.
If you are here, DM me.
All of our supporters, please make sure that you boost and support that. That's a great effort.
Yeah. If anybody has any connections, but we're trying to get their perspectives and people involved in the Post about the state of journalism. But we were talking about that, and we were talking about where they're going next and how there's half of them that are like, oh, I'm trying to find a job. I know some people going to the Telegraph, some people going to NBC, some of them that are coming to Substack and starting their own newsletters on WordPress, Substack, whatever. And
it's a great idea.
I think it's a fantastic idea.
I've had this account for a while. I didn't really fire it up until a couple months ago, when people who were basically screwed over by the cable news networks came over here and found that there was an audience that loved them over there, and they just took that audience and brought them over here and have a more direct relationship with them. And I think that's fantastic, because I know that these folks were the money makers for MSNBC, NBC, CNN. I'm going to leave Fox out of it, but that's who they would go cultivate to bring them on, to draw you and me in to watch the voice of these particular experts. And now those people talk to us directly here. So it's a great idea.
Yeah. I think that there's been so many instances of like video killed the radio star. We saw the print newspapers fell out of fashion when TV cable news came into fashion, which went out of fashion when digital platforms. And now everyone's trying to grapple with social media. And honestly, we should have grappled there. I had a conversation with a great professor of mine who is a contributing editor to The Wire, an amazing Jeff Howe. I'm pretty sure he is me, but older and a man, which is to say severe ADHD, addicted to go into comfort zones. But he was talking about how he'll speak to so many small papers and even legacy papers that say, "Oh, well, we're trying to learn the digital platforms." It's 2026. You should have learned the digital platforms 20 years ago. It's moving far more quickly, I think. And I wonder what there's been the invention of the printing press over and over and over and over again. And I wonder if we're on the cusp of another person that I'd love to boost. Jamie Bellinger is a photographer. If anyone's interested in protest photography, he is my number one inspiration. He's based in the UK. A great photographer, and he's doing zines. And I'm trying to get my hands on one shipped to the US. We'll see if that happens. But there's been this rise in photographers making zines and journalists, writers making Substacks and newsletters, and this direct to person. And I wonder if that's going to be something in that direct to person connection that is going to be the next big thing. And I hope it is, because I feel like it's more authentic, it's more genuine, it's more human. And I think that's my perspective on journalism in general, is it needs to be more human. And I think that's why I really admire you, is that you push that as well.
I appreciate that. And I can say that there are people who set a standard for me by what they did. One that calls to mind was a young woman who worked in our news wing back at KPFT, Shannon Young, who she brought a mini disc in when there was a local board meeting for the radio station. This is so micro, this is not like the national board. This is not international politics. It was politics at the station level, right? And there were two guys who'd gone in the hallway to decide how one of them would vote. She walks right up. She goes, "So, would you like to discuss what you do?" "Hey, we're having a conversation." "Right, but would you like to discuss what your vote will be?" "Again, we're having a conversation." And the two men walked into the bathroom and basically pushed the door shut because she's a woman. She has to stay outside. So she stuck her foot in the doorway. And she put the microphone in the doorway. And one of them opened the door, shoved her out of the way. She comes over to me and she says, "I need you to quickly transfer this audio." And I'm like, "What is it? Just hurry, hurry, hurry." Transfer the audio over. Someone from the station grabs the microphone or grabs the mini disc recorder, takes it off, and then goes and says it didn't happen. Wait a minute, it did happen. Hold on. And it was that quick and that dynamic. Here's why it matters. She said, "I learned that from a Mexican journalist who had to confront powers that be in the same exact way." Holy shit. So you see how the littlest things that people learn in one conflict translate to something really not nearly as dramatic as Mexican politics. But I live in Ukraine, where the battle over journalism has cost lives. And I don't mean with Russia. I mean, in the last 20 years, there are significant stories here where small journalists who wanted to confront corrupt powers were killed, intimidated, and it's a whole different breed here. So for those who don't know, I've had people ask me, it's like, why is Ukrainska Pravda so confrontational? It's a long story how it got that way, and it's something that we as Westerners really need to learn to respect. That here, now that we approach the 12-year anniversary of Euromaidan, that's why it got that way, is that people were dying without that being the one weapon they could use to hold an oligarch, a corrupt official, completely accountable.
Yeah.
Press.
It
That's
really
true in many
is.
parts of the world, yeah.
And I think it's so fascinating. And I spoke a professor that I had when I was studying abroad in Spain. It was an amazing opportunity that I've learned that I got a lot of opportunities that people didn't. I got to speak to pretty much the representatives from every major political party in Spain, including the far right party, who apparently no longer talks to students, especially not from our school. And I really hope that that's not because of the questions that I asked him about why he does not separate church and state. Sorry about that, Northeastern University. But it's my professor, I remember him telling me that he was a journalist and he was basically, I think, where was he? He worked in Cuba for a while, but I believe, he was a great journalist in Cuba. He was unraveling this investigation about corruption within between at the highest levels of government with the telecommunications private sector. And I was just thinking about this because I think I told you about how I just did a presentation for a class about I got to Ukraine on the 28th of November, the same day that Andrei Yermak was his house was raided and he was dismissed later that same day in connection to Operation Midas. And this was, I think I talked to you about this the other day. It's a kind of internal conflict I've had as a journalist is I come from like all the posters of Zelensky, that Time magazine cover, and then I come to Ukraine where I'm seeing there's protests at Maidan Square and they're against government corruption. There's in the summer, there was massive protests and there is
and it breaks out when I'm in the South of all places. I went to Mykolaiv and a protest of that level breaks out while I'm away.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. No, it was actually very.
They were
I knew so many people in that crowd now. That was an honor. I knew so many people as the videos were going. I know her and him and him and him, and it wasn't distant like it was when I was in Texas.
Yeah. It's really interesting and kind of unraveling these stories and how it's the journalists who, because it is not easy to report about active investigations, especially I've done it. I'm working on it right now. I can't go into it, of course, classified, but Jesus, it is a nightmare trying to report on something, corruption in which there is an active investigation. It's terrifying.
Correct.
And it is, I have so many times I've had sites that I've worked with been seized. Some of my data collection platforms with data that I spent months collecting have been seized. Wow. And especially I think that it is especially worse under this current government in the US, but there are so many ways that they will go at so many extent to silence journalists, to intimidate journalists, to do anything to prevent journalism from happening because they know that the power of journalism is that change will happen. If we don't know about these things, and that's the simplest thing of like people, I think, especially in my generation, love to be, and I say this with love to my fellow Gen Zers on here, internet warriors. We love to go in and comment. Thank you, Dan. We love to go in and comment about, oh, how dare you do this? How dare this happen? And we love to say, oh, this is why I don't trust legacy news, that no one's reporting on this. It's like, that is a side note. Something that I really hate is when people say no one's reporting on this when what they actually mean is none of the Instagram accounts that I follow are posting about this often. When it's like, yeah, a lot of people reporting. I saw someone commented, no one's reporting about this on an article by The Guardian. And I'm like, it's right there. It's right there. But it's, as much as we want to deny, like, we want to put all journalists in that bubble of the media, we need to understand that it is journalists. You wouldn't know about these things. We wouldn't, I don't know if we'd know about Operation Midas without the journalists who are investigating that. We wouldn't know about a lot of corruption schemes. I mean, as much as we are so disappointed with the Washington Post right now, they have done so many actions to blow open stories that were historic, that changed history. And I'm currently a big Boston Globe reader. Every time I think at least once a week, I try to get the print edition of the Boston Globe. And I know I have the absolute honor of knowing people who were on the original Spotlight team that blew open as a sex abuse scandal within the Catholic Church. And without those journalists, that would have continued, that we would have a severe epidemic of sex abuse within the Catholic Church if it weren't for the journalists who were able to do that investigation, blow that open. So I think the great journalists are journalists who don't back down, who continue. And I think that you journalists who have worked in Ukraine, yourself, many other people that I met in Ukraine are forced to be some of the people who are going at it no matter what. No matter if there's a government that is trying to intimidate you, no matter if there is people being like, why are you in Ukraine so much? Come back to the States. No matter what, that you are able to continue reporting on these things that are hard to report about, but important to report about. That is great journalism.
Well, and I told you, and I've told my viewers before that another aspect, and I'll come back to the power of the government, is that the power of the emotion of someone in front of you who deeply feels something. And the example I use that changed how I view my role was a POW mom who had cynicism of the government officials, the Ukrainian government officials, and whether or not they were working at all levels to help bring her son home, and gave me a whole explanation of what that meant to her. And I took notes of where she stood with it, what the accusation was. I already knew that there were contradictory bits of evidence to that concern, but I didn't tell her that yet because I wanted to hear her entirely. I wanted to go review it again, and I met with her 2 weeks later, and I said, "Well, according to my notes, here's what I found." And I literally handed over my manual to her, or my POW notebook, and the translator that was with us, basically he's great at what he does. So he's a professional at the finest level because he knows what I'm saying in an interpretive way to really get her to hear me, not to hear words, but to hear what I'm trying to tell her, which is, I really looked, Mama. I don't see it. What I see is the power in this decision is in Russia. And I was making no comment about whether or not the government was effective, the Ukrainian government was effective in all these other areas. I just wanted to answer her question whether or not there was a bias against her son coming home, or a lack of interest in bringing him home. And what I've told people later is, if you can do this kind of job with that emotional orbit going on, good luck to you, because it's a lot harder than you think. To take people who have tremendous suffering of occupation, of captured families, of missing children, of an unknown. Like right now, I have a lot of cases that we don't know what the situation is with that defender. They're just not there. The government doesn't know. They're not on a checklist yet. They're not in a Red Cross database of captivity in Russia, and then I have to say to myself, she might not get good news at all. She might get no news ever. And so I have to really navigate these emotional waters, but I have to do it as professional as possible. And what I found is, and the good news is, when I keep doing it professionally, where I keep doing it in a way that shows that the facts matter, and then I have both compartment for the emotions on one side, the hugs. I'm with you, Mama, and we'll get to the bottom of this best we can, or a wife or someone. Then we come back and say, well, this is what we found. And when they see that the work was done to the best possible ability, that's mostly all they're going to ask for out of someone like you and I, is just give me your honest opinion, your honest work, and the rest we know we both can't control. And it's been life-changing for me to be in that situation.
Yeah. And I think a good lesson from that, because I remember I was really pondering on that after you told me that story, is being very transparent. And of course, it's
Right.
like, of course, we need to be transparent as journalists.
And
But-
I keep this, actually, I'll show to the viewers. It's this notebook that I keep really with me. Every one of the releases. So like the other day I was mentioning, like the Sean Penner release and Aiden Aslan's right here. And all of these things, she could physically look through the work. And there's a reason why we call it journalism.
Yes.
I have 15 of these. They're different topical bits, but she could see that the work was done. Yeah. It was actual work done, and good luck ever making sense of my notes.
Oh God.
The second thing, back to the government, is I have. Go ahead.
I said, you can't try and read my handwriting. It's illegible.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing is that when people come to me with very difficult cases that really require taking on government power and authority, and you're independent, you don't have a legal team, you don't have a big bureau that can throw everything at them, like, some major newspapers. And this happened with, Don Lemon in Georgia. I can't remember her name. Forgive me, last name. If you remember, tell me. But John Lemon has resources, even if he's not with CNN anymore, but the other journalist does not. And that includes that intimidation power. So let's talk about that for a minute from your angle.
Yeah. I think that we're in a space in America right now where and this kind of, I don't want to go against what I've just said about the power of the independent press.
No.
And
Right.
we're in a state right now where it doesn't matter whether you have the backing or not. We have to be upfront with ourselves that this is not the norm. This is not just another Republican president. And it's not just the president. We're in a state that is not going to tolerate anything that goes against it. It's something that I've heard. What really worries me is how much I've heard from people when I was interviewing people over Zoom in Minneapolis. The way they spoke about ICE and about the government is very similar to the way I heard Iranians speak about their police and their government, which is terrifying, especially having been very involved and being very knowledgeable about the history of those two situations. But I mean, look at there was she Washington Post or someone else a journalist, a fantastic journalist whose house was searched for reasons that were really not true, and everyone knows they're not true.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's I was just emailing Nigel Stanage, former Hot Press, big ups, an Irish lad who works for The Hill. He has a political column. I'd really recommend reading his column about Jesse Jackson, really powerful.
Right.
I mean, he was the one where he asked Caroline Levitt in a press conference, why it's something very simple. It was very well worded about it. He said something much more well worded to the degree of like, why is ICE shooting unarmed civilians? Is there going to be retribution for ICE shooting civilians that were unarmed, that are U.S. citizens? Why is ICE targeting U.S. citizens? It was something like that. Caroline Levitt went out and said, "You're a left-wing hack who you shouldn't call himself."
Remember that, right?
Yeah, and Nigel's been a great role model of mine, and it was like, anyone who knows him or knows his work knows what a talented journalist he is, and how journalistically skilled he is. He is not a left-wing hack. He is a great journalist. We see it over and over again of like the president, a reporter asking a very intelligent question, and because she was a woman, the president goes quiet. They do not respect journalists. They don't see journalists. They see journalists as a nuisance, like more vermin than people. You have to understand that it doesn't matter. It's like my perspective on the dangers of how it was challenging for me to go to Ukraine as a freelancer and as an independent journalist was more in the way of like, I had never been to a war zone before. I'm 20. I'm going on third class on the train because that's all I can afford. I'm staying in a hostel for €8 a night. That's where it was challenging for me. And the knowledge that I can't afford life insurance and I can't afford PPE. Where some other journalists can, and they have that expectation. And versus when I come back to the States, the danger in being a journalist at all is that you will be targeted, is that you need to I'm pretty soon I'm going to be hosting, I don't know if any of my lovely Huntington News people are here, but if you are, big things coming. I'm going to be hosting a workshop about journalistic safety and journalistic security and how you need to have a hard drive, an external hard drive that is separate from your computer, and you need to put anything even slightly sensitive on that hard drive.
Right.
I remember in the early days of quite early in the days of Trump, I got served a subpoena for my reporting on pro-immigration, protests to protect immigrants in East Boston. And I got from I forgot, don't know if it was DHS or what. It looked like a mass email. They were sending it to anyone who had reported with certain keywords. But basically, they were saying that you have reported, you interviewed someone who admitted to being an illegal immigrant or the child of an illegal immigrant. Please report to court. We want you to go to court, and you need to share the names of all these people. And I was terrified. And back when, I don't know if anyone's here, but back when Sana was our EIC, I was panic emailing her. Sana, I don't know what to do. This is so scary. And she goes, "You have First Amendment rights." There is absolutely it's clear in the wording of that email, and it's clear in the law that they have no legal right to have those sources' names. That it is completely in your rights as a journalist to say, no, I will not be sharing those names. And
Right.
that's what you did. Is that I
Well,
said,
this
no,
is why let me put this bridge to you, because I think one of the things we have to do now, especially in this era, especially for you being in America, is listen to like Brian Karem and my interview with him 2 weeks ago, where
yeah,
he
it's
went
good.
to jail 4 times in order to not reveal sources. And
Yeah.
when we hear what they went through in order to make sure that the sources were protected and they kept their journalistic integrity intact at the same time, then those of us in other positions that may not have been there have to look at that model and go, first off, buck up. It's probably going to be difficult. Or go write about the little poetry slam that happened, and
Yeah.
go write about the gardening thing that's going on next weekend. That's the choice that could be made. But we can look at models of people who've been oppressed already and how they fought back. And the second part of what you made very clear is the brain fuckery needs to be challenged by
Mhm.
virtue of saying it's an illusion. It's designed to make me afraid. So let me back up and see what I should do, not the reactive side, which is what it's designed to elicit.
Yeah. Why should I let a press secretary with migrated lip filler tell me what to be scared of? Not to push that's not to push down other women. It's Caroline Levitt, so it's allowed.
Yeah, it's targeted,
Um,
right, right.
but I think it's so fascinating, and I know that at least one of my parents is in this chat. Dad, if you're still here, I'm sorry, but my mom has gotten after me and be like, I've got a cousin who works, I believe, for Women's Health in the UK, and her
Hmm.
job is pretty much to get sent on all expenses paid vacations and go to spas in the Swiss Alps and
Oh,
spas in Thailand and then review them and get the full experience, then review it. My mom's
right.
like, "Why can't you be like your cousin? Why can't you be like Grace and go to a spa in Thailand and have a mud bath and report about that?" And I'm
Wow.
like, I feel like some of us have, as the great Jeff Howe would say, is that there's probably something wrong with our brain chemistry. Is that some of us are willing to dive, like we see a fire and we run into it. Like it is the willing. There are certain journalists who are willing to do that, and it's it is not. Sorry, I just got a text. It is not necessarily in our like interests necessarily. It's not our thing to um go into a spa. It's not
Right,
the impact that we see. And that is still great journalism. That is still journalism. I wouldn't like there's some things that I say aren't journalism. Being an
right.
influencer is not being journalism. I will stand by that. But
Amen.
to report on anything in a journalistic, ethical way is journalism. But there are different kinds, of course. But I think that there's a certain level of like when you start it, you can't stop. And I know I was talking to people about the Nieman Fellowship. I know quite a few Nieman Fellows, and I had always looked at it as like this is you make your way in journalism and then you go to Harvard and you be a Nieman Fellow. But
Hmm.
what actually Jeff Howe told me was that because he was like, I was talking to him about my experience reporting in Ukraine. He had reported in the former Yugoslavia. He's
Hmm.
been through some very intense situations, and he asked me. He was like, we went over my experiences in the East, which I'll write about. I won't go into it here, but some things that I think that maybe my mom is right to say that she expected I would have done this when I was older. But things that I did not, that nothing can prepare you to see. That no matter if you're a journalist, no matter if you're Ukrainian or American, no matter who you are, there are certain things that nothing can really prepare you to see and experience and have that sensory experience. But he was talking about it and he said that the Nieman Fellowship for a lot of journalists, he asked me, I told him about that. He asked me, are you sure that this is what you want to do? And all he needed was a yes, because it's worth it. Yes, because of the people that journalism can help. Yes, because of the systems that journalism can hold to account. That is why, yes, I will continue to do this. He also said that like the Nieman Fellowship tends to be kind of a break for a lot of conflict journalists and a lot of journalists who go into these situations that run into the fire. They go to the Nieman Fellowship, whether it's a break or whether it's a transition into kind of, I hate to say it, but normal life. Um, it's, I think that there is kind of a balance that I'm still learning how to walk. And I think many people spend a lot of their career learning how to walk, of like to what
Right.
degree do you engage in this? Because I was speaking to a colleague a while ago about how a lot of Gen Zers have co-opted like, oh, self-care is resistance. Like it's lost its meaning at this point, but to what degree do journalists have to like owe continuous coverage versus to what degree does continuous coverage help the public? Because those are different questions, and we don't have to say one thing or the other. We can put them in conversation. We can hold two ideas in our head at once, and that's the sign of intelligence. We can hope to do that, hope to be intelligent, but
Exactly.
yeah.
I mean, I'm looking at I have a calendar that I use to keep up. It's on my Sampson Shuts website. 1,409 days of full-scale war for me. Like I said, it's the full amount minus 46. And no vacations. I don't go to Zakarpattia. And one of my great friends who, maybe you should take it. With what? Every dollar that comes in goes back into the work that's happening in front of me. And more resources only mean that I would spend more of the work. It's not going to turn into suddenly I'm going to go take my week's vacation in the Carpathians after the war, maybe, but not during the war. But I do it like this. I wake up, and when I feel like that pain that's just human,
Mhm.
I look at the people that don't have the luxury of stopping from that.
Yeah.
I know too many POWs who come home, too many families that waited for them, who currently wait for them, all of those different situations. And I say, buck up, go get your coffee, go for a walk, rest a
Eh,
little bit, go take a nap. It's okay, take a nap and then wake up. The conflict will still be there. The war will
yeah.
still be there. The crisis will still be there. It'll still be cold. The missiles
Mhm.
will still be coming, but you got a little bit of a rest for how long? An hour, 2 hours. Okay. I don't think I've had a single day off, and I don't know when because I don't take days off. What I do is I balance the time so that I maintain. And when I find that I'm getting overwhelmed, I get on the phone with people I trust to verbalize, scream about it, yell about it, bitch about it, point fingers in every possible direction of failures, including myself, and then okay, back to work. And then it's cathartic. And then like, okay, so what's the assignments again? Okay, and I resort and I resort and I resort. And that's really the way you get through such a thing. And then
Yeah.
what I've been telling my American friends when I call occupation, um, that's actually how I greet them. Hey, how's everything in occupation? Are you guys okay? Um, is I have to now I have to babysit, and I'm going to use that phrase. I have some friends in here who have heard that when they're on the phone with me. I have to babysit people who are new at full boot fascism.
Yeah.
And I mean that with kindness, meaning that I know that there's this transition phase between, but I thought it was going to be bad, but oh my God, Chris, this is terrible. And I'm like, you're still in that adjustment phase. And
Yeah.
I can respect it. I care about the very people I'm talking to, but
Mhm.
I have to think about what can I say to this person that translates that. And the additional part is something I learned years ago doing personal security training in Houston. It was this, a small period of life where I would go travel around with someone and I go, okay, you're getting out and getting your gas. Yeah. Where's your purse? Unattended. Right. Okay. And when you drive, how did you decide to drive today? Yeah. And why did you decide to drive that way? Okay. Next time when you're in, and just little things that are blind spots being checked and challenged. I can't take my sense of what safety is and apply it to anyone else. It's mine. It's based on my skill set and my experience. And when I tell someone else, please do the following, if they cannot do it, I'm totally screwing them over. And in America, like you said, journalistic safety courses or journalistic safety measures. Well, I don't mind putting this even on Substack. I am currently teaching people intelligence and counterintelligence method for activists so that they know what the Proud Boys are doing, where the Patriot Front guys are, to the best of the ability, how to gain better intelligence on what they're up to, how to understand what they see, in ways that way when like Keith Burwell of the Proud Boys walks up to me at the Broward County Election Center and, are you Antifa? First off, back the fuck up. Okay, I'm sorry. Am I Antifa? Have you seen them around here? I didn't see them on Saturday. Oh yeah, I didn't either.
Heard
We're
at
Proud
home.
Boys. Yeah, he's like, well, we're Proud Boys. I said, no, you're Keith Burwell, that's Jonathan Pearson, and I named all seven of them, and he didn't know what to do with that. I'm a
Yeah.
counterterrorism guy who had archives of everything they were up to. I was in his head this time around. So as a journalist, the same sort of skills are available where
Mhm.
you know who you are, you know what you're empowered what to do, and also the limitations of what your power really is, and don't go outside the lane, and always have a buddy system.
Yeah. This is something that, like, I believe so, so strongly in that I've really had to adapt, and that one of my biggest lessons, I think, from the past year is buddy system, working with a team, being able to lean on other people, because when I started investigating and, like, if I was just doing a solo piece and
Mhm.
all my sites got seized by the US government, uh, I wouldn't know what to do. I would have to quit. But when you have those backups, when you have other people with other perspectives, and you can say, and
Yeah,
they're always going to notice something you aren't. I think I am working
right.
on something right now that what can I won't, I'm trying to think of what I can share.
Sure.
It's an intelligence, thing, and maybe we can
Right.
chat about it another time, but
Yeah.
it's regarding intelligence software, and, it turns out someone had a very similar pitch to mine, and I was doing it solo for ages, and it's been so hard because the Northeastern University Media, and Communications department, they know my name, and I know them, and I know which of them was in the Epstein files, and I know which of them does not like to communicate with people, and which of them is going to, most of them, who are going to respond to my email with just no comment sent from my iPhone, which is
Sure.
most of them. So having this other perspective, it's this kid, I I forgot his name, but where he's joined me on this project, and he's like, it is so great because he is so open to learning about these things of, like, what sounds almost conspiracy-ish, this all the connections of the different private sector and public sector, kind of
Mhm.
where it all connects. Well, just I think he's a first or second year, and they don't know his name. So he can send those emails, and they'll send out comment, and they'll agree to, maybe not an interview, but they'll give you a quote.
Right.
And that all when we have being able to work together and having all of our data and all of our notes either on paper or on external hard drives is it's a weight off your shoulders. It's safer,
Right.
and it makes you a better journalist. Is like you're able to bounce ideas off people, you're able to collaborate. Someone will always notice something that you didn't notice. It is
Right.
so, so important. And
I would say also putting very valuable information in reliable hands in more than one location.
yes.
Awesome. I have entire what I call death switches. If something happens to me, unleash the hounds.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I've been living in this war for almost 4 years, and there are certain things that happen with people that try to power trip and pull things. And you, again, buddy system, you go talk to people who you count on and say, this is so stressful, and I can't believe it's happening. You get past the emotive side of reacting, and then you get to the strategy side. Well, how
Yeah.
important is this to do? Well, it's very important. How important is it to act on it right now? Well, that's a good question. Okay, so we'll wait on that. And then how big are you? I'm only this. This is the entirety of my corporal being. Um, but by spreading that information into reliable hands and making sure that other people understand what to do with it, and I mean reliable. So
Mhm.
we find out the hard way in war. Yeah, you don't really know what that means. You're gonna
Yes.
find out, like, let's say you have 25 reliable friends, and suddenly you find out 5 years later you had 19.
5 reliable friends. You had
Yeah,
5.
or 5, right. Whatever the number is, and there's still the ones that betray and have for different reasons even, sometimes out of ignorance, sometimes out of selfishness, sometimes out of money, any ideological differences, whatever, and the more you protect yourself, the better. The way in which you do it is gonna change, one, how you do your career, because later on you'll call back, "I remember when I did that and it saved my ass," or, "I remember when I did that and it worked against me."
Yeah. Look, I hate to cut you
No,
off.
this is good.
I've got the librarian looking at me, so if we wanna go over, like, one more, he's putting up a 5. We wanna go over, like, if you have one more thing that you really wanted to touch on, like a
Well,
topic.
we're actually we'll do exactly that. We'll end at my time 11:30, so we'll go the last 5 minutes. So I will say this, we're gonna have you back, so for all the viewers, don't worry, we're not done with this. This is the beginning of a dialogue where we're gonna keep this going. Let's leave it like this. What is the thing that you found most personally rewarding about Ukraine when you were here? That when you go back, you're like, if I had to do it all over again, that's why I'm so thankful I got to see that. What was it?
The people, just the people, everyone. I think the Ukrainians, the people who live in Ukraine, it takes a special kind to be a non-Ukrainian and to live in Ukraine. But I remember I arrived when I was going to my hostel, which was overlooking Maidan Square, and there was a big protest there, and I didn't understand it. It was an Italian journalist who explained to me that it was a protest, and it was a little Ukrainian lady, like a little babushka, who spoke English, who came up to me, and she's like, "It's cold, and you're American, and you're not from here. Do you understand what's going on?" And she's like, "Do you have coffee?" And I was like, "Oh no, I'm okay. I had coffee." She comes back, brings me a coffee, and she's like, "Do you need anything? Do you have a place to stay?" The people are so kind, and in Kharkiv specifically, I'll end with this. The most significant experiences that I had were off camera, off recording interviews, and one of the greatest, the one that I will never forget was coming on the overnight train from Kharkiv to Lviv, and the two women in the compartment, it was like a sleeper train. They didn't speak English, but there was a man on the other side who spoke English, and we had this funny conversation because I had lost my wallet in Kharkiv. I was freaking out. That's how he learned that I spoke English.
Right.
And he introduced, and he was like, he prayed for me, and he said, "Can I say a prayer for you?" Then he said, "I'm a Catholic priest." And then we had this conversation a bit about religion, and then he said that here, I'm going to tell you something that no one else is going to tell you, and that's that, at least for us in Kharkiv, and I think for a lot of people in the rest of Ukraine, though they don't want to admit it, the war made us better. And I was like, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Because there in Kharkiv, there's no way to not help. There's no way to not everyone either volunteered, joined the military, stood up. These people are so passionate about who they are despite everything. And they're so kind, and they are so interesting. And even when they're like, 'Oh, I don't know if I'm comfortable talking about this in an interview, but I want to tell you about my son who's a prisoner. I want to tell you about my uncle who I lost. I want to tell you." The little girls in the violin class are like, "I just made first chair violin. Let me tell you about that." These people who are so open and so kind, despite I know that I have the privilege of going home. That I have the privilege of going home to somewhere where, yes, it's occupation, yes, it's fascism, but I have a warm bed, and I do not have to worry about a Shahed missile falling on that bed. I have that privilege. They don't, and yet they are so much more positive than me. And so I think that what the best thing that I saw in Ukraine was the people and the way that they're willing to stand up to their government too. That despite it all, they are like, we say resilient over and over again, but they are truly, they have integrity, and they have openness and a pride that I really, really admire.
Well, it has been an honor to have you on. My impulse to say, and my instinct to say, I think we're going to have this conversation was correct, and I personally was rewarded with the time. Our viewers were. Make sure you are following Chloe's account, and if you're one of those people who has the ability to do so, get a paid version of it, at least the $5, and pile that up because, like I've said before, this is your project as much as ours, and those of you who are viewers are getting like. This is your broadcasting network organically being built in front of you, one person at a time, one voice at a time. And Chloe, please come back.
And my account, it's on my Substack, it's the Craft Dispatch. There will be updated dispatches from Ukraine, and there will likely be a continuation of more of my coverage and the story behind the story. So there will be things posted there. And thank you so much for having me. It's fantastic.
Of course. Tell your librarian I said thank you.
Yes, of course.
See you soon.
Best wishes to you.
Double patches. So I'll stay here and give a couple of more comments before we go. Thank you. This is why, Tom, Molodets, you did great. She's outstanding, and she'll be back on for that very reason that I've said this before. I don't throw out compliments. They're not gifts. They're earned. They're earned by what I see that I marvel at, and I don't do this job I do in a vacuum. I have people who are models for me. It's not an age thing either. Chloe being 20, that's the future of where journalism will be. There was a time when I was obsessed with news as just a, you know, consumer of news, but I was rigorous about it. I really appreciated quality news. I was a newspaper boy, while I started with 9 people on the route, I think 10 people on the route, and I had it so big, I lost my own job because of success. I had to have an older person who had a station wagon drive around to deliver 40 something newspapers because on Sunday it was impossible for me to do. If you told me later I'd be doing journalism instead of the Tour de France or playing guitar, I wouldn't have understood what you were saying. I thought you were crazy. But I know when I was at KPFT at the news department, we felt that there were communities that needed to have that microphone with 100,000 watts of radio in their hands to tell their stories because major media wouldn't be talking to them. And now that I live here, it's the same way. I literally have stood in crowds of defender families who are needing the advocacy and the microphone in their corner, and I yell in Ukrainian, "Я не бачу CNN, я не бачу BBC, що це, bro?" You know, I don't see CNN, I don't see the competition, as they call it. Where are they? Be glad to have more than enough competition at those. And I mean competition in a friendly way. Something where I look at the other article and I went, man, they really did far better than I wrote about it. Let me go back and do a better job at the thing I just need to be doing. Okay. And I'm going to try even harder. So I want to ask you again, follow Chloe's account and join us tomorrow. I'll be bringing Colonel Morris Davis on, who actually was in my first podcast in Veracity Radio in 2010 when I left the station and I wasn't done with doing journalism. I cracked open Veracity Radio. It was an impulse to say, I need to ask questions about the Cheney administration's black sites, the torture accountability problem that we were seeing in the news. That I was getting, what I used to say is, you get 10 to 15 minutes on, Rachel Maddow or Situation Room, and that's it, and then it's on to the next segment. No, we need better than that. So I interviewed a range of folks at that time, and the first guest that I had on, he was definitely the first guest, was Colonel Morris Davis, who now runs for office in North Carolina, and he was a Republican at that time. He was basically one of those old style, just conservative guys. Probably, and actually, to be honest with you, I don't think he was political. I think he was a military guy who had a sense of duty and responsibility to his job and to his legal, shall I say, his legal wherewithal. And Admiral Stephen Haynes said there will be no acquittals, and he said that's not justice. That's not how things work. So that's what we'll talk about a little bit tomorrow night. Is what happens when you have to be that patriot of integrity in a time of such chaos. And right here on Substack, we get to do this stuff. I want to thank you for joining us tonight. And you know how I always do this. Slava Ukraini, Heroям Slava, і пиздець Російській Федерації.